Take a close look at these two Disney cartoons. They're separated by only 8 years, but in those 8 years, Disney's style of animation completely transformed. And that transformation is more than just going from black and white to color, from musical accompaniment to synchronized dialogue, or from 7-minute short films to feature-length narratives. No, the biggest transformation occurred in the way cartoon characters moved. On the left, the dwarves move back and forth in a rhythmic but monotonous fashion. Their torsos bounce from left to right as if independent of their heads, and their limbs move like noodles, infinitely flexible and seemingly without any skeletal structure. By contrast, the dwarves on the right are drawn with a sense of weight and volume. When one part of their bodies move, their entire body moves along with it. When Happy shakes his head dry, his belly wiggles, and as he does so, he braces himself against the wash basin, like a real person would. And though his face, like the 1929 dwarves, is almost supernaturally flexible, it snaps back into place. These two distinct styles of animation would come to be known in animation discourse as rubber hose animation and squash and stretch animation. The big difference between these styles is physical realism. In the old style, characters' bodies can stretch and transform almost infinitely. In the new style, characters' bodies can stretch too, but their volumes remain consistent, like a bag of flour. Walt Disney's big idea was that to emotionally identify with cartoon characters, they need to feel physically real, as if their bodies had weight and volume, like ours. While we might value the squash and stretch style for the very qualities that Disney himself was seeking to cultivate, Sergei Eisenstein, the great Soviet filmmaker and film theorist, would look at it a bit differently. In his unfinished book, published under the title Notes on Disney, Eisenstein attempts to explain why he feels Disney cartoons are so special. He claims that Disney's cartoon characters exhibit what he calls plasmaticity, a kind of freedom of form, an ability to shapeshift. In his words, plasmaticity is a rejection of once and forever allotted form, freedom from ossification, the ability to dynamically assume any form. Importantly, plasmaticity doesn't mean the lack of form, it means the possibility of changing your form. Think of plasmatic cartoon characters as having something in common with amoebas. Their contours are infinitely malleable, but they never break. While Eisenstein saw these transformative qualities across the history of Disney, the heyday of plasmaticity is 1920s Disney, the era of rubber hose animation, when torsos and limbs would stretch and grow and transform without any semblance of physical realism. He saw Mickey's stretched out torso as part of a long transcultural tradition of fantastically moving bodies, seen in the illustrations of Alice and Alice in Wonderland, and in the drawings of German caricaturist Walter Trier, and in the Japanese woodcuts of Toyohiro. Eisenstein claimed that there was something not only aesthetically but politically satisfying about these bodily transformations. He writes, "In a country in social order with such a mercilessly standardized and mechanically measured existence, which is difficult to call life, the sight of such omnipotence cannot but hold a sharp degree of attractiveness." In other words, Eisenstein saw in those elastic-limbed cartoon characters a kind of fantasy of freedom, a freedom from mechanicity, from social convention, and importantly, for the notably Marxist Eisenstein, a freedom from the strictures of a distinctly capitalist society. Having visited Disney Studios, Eisenstein was of course aware of the irony that these very cartoons were produced with a capitalist mode of production, a hierarchical division of labor so rigid and organized that it would make Henry Ford jealous. But nevertheless for Eisenstein, the purely visual fantasies of limitless flexibility and changeability exhibited in Disney films was a palliative for living in a rigid social structure. This way of looking at animation, celebrating the medium's capacity for play, freedom, and subversion at the expense of its capacity for realism, would be vastly influential in animation scholarship throughout the late 20th and early 21st centuries. We can see distinct echoes of this way of thinking in the work of animation scholar Scott Buchotman. In his essay Cartoon Physics, Buchotman, like Eisenstein, celebrates the unique qualities of animated cartoons for bending the laws of actual physics to create a new, more playful kind of physics, a cartoon physics. He gets the term cartoon physics from a 1980 Esquire article that playfully describes a number of familiar cartoon gags in the form of scientific laws. Law number 1. Any body suspended in space will remain in space until made aware of its situation. Law number 3. Any body passing through solid matter will leave a perforation conforming to its perimeter. Law number 4. Certain bodies can pass through solid walls painted to resemble tunnel entrances. Others cannot. Well, Buchotman is writing about Goofy and Roadrunner and Tom and Jerry, characters from the 50s, whose bodies aren't quite plasmatic but certainly violate all matter of physical laws. He still explicitly draws on Eisenstein's way of thinking about animated cartoons. He writes, "The freedom claimed for the cartoon by Eisenstein here becomes a freedom from traditional causality, freedom from natural law, and freedom from consequence. Both the cartoon's plasmatic possibilities and its animistic tendencies are reflected in cartoon physics, despite their more rule-bound nature." So while for Buchotman, mid-century cartoon physics is perhaps more rule-bound than Eisenstein's plasmaticity, they both share the same spirit of breaking from the confines of material reality. In other words, they do what only animation, as distinct from live-action film, can do. With animation, there are no conceivable limits to what you can draw. But this begs the question, given animation's history of playfully defying physics, why is it that the most successful American studio animation today is painstakingly replicating the laws of the physical world rather than defying them? The incredible success of studios like Disney and Pixar, which use immensely complicated algorithms to simulate the physics of natural environments and human bodies, should make us wonder if animation's playful subversion of the physical world is not what it used to be. In Buchotman's words, the advent of digital animation in Hollywood has yielded films of sometimes great beauty and humor, rich in the textures of the world. But their great achievements can come at the expense of what truly characterized the Hollywood cartoon in its 7-minute heyday, its playful remaking of the world. Even today's superhero films, which we might argue perfectly give us the fantasy of freedom that Eisenstein and Buchotman cherish, might be said to only give us a partial freedom. As Buchotman writes, even in the genre that most celebrates alternative kinds of bodies, the superhero film, physical laws must be respected, even as a few of them are being revised. So what do you think? Has CGI killed the plasmatic? Or is Buchotman missing something about the appeal of computer-generated imagery? Do we have the capacity to use CGI in ways that continues the spirit of plasmaticity and cartoon physics? Or does the technology itself determine a straight road to realism?